Your Ford is carrying a hidden reset that takes 30 seconds, costs absolutely nothing, and fixes engine problems that dealers charge hundreds of dollars to diagnose. Most Ford owners have no idea this feature even exists, and the ones who do usually perform it wrong, which is almost worse than not doing it at all. I've been working on Fords for over 15 years, and I've watched the same owners come back to the dealership month after month, paying for fixes that this one free procedure would have handled in their own driveway. By the time this video is over, you'll never waste another dollar on a diagnostic appointment for these problems again. Section 1. The setup. On what Ford doesn't tell you. Let me tell you about a customer I had last spring. He drove in a 2019 F-150 EcoBoost that was stumbling at idle, sluggish off the line, and getting 14 miles per gallon when it used to get 18. He'd already been to 2 shops. First shop charged him $120 to run a diagnostic scan, found nothing definitive, and suggested cleaning the throttle body for another $150. Second shop told him the MAF sensor was reading slightly off and quoted $220 for a replacement. He paid both of them. The truck still ran the same way. When he pulled into my bay, I asked him one question. When did you last do an ECU reset and relearn? He stared at me like I'd just spoken a different language. That's the problem. Ford builds this capability directly into every single modern vehicle they produce. It's sitting there right now in your truck or SUV, ready to wipe out months of accumulated bad data that's been quietly strangling your engine's performance. But Ford doesn't advertise it. Dealerships don't mention it during service visits. And because it costs nothing and takes 30 seconds, there's zero financial incentive for anyone in the service industry to bring it up. That changes today. This reset works on virtually every Ford with electronic throttle control, which covers the vast majority of trucks, SUVs, and cars built from the early 2000s onward. F-150, Super Duty, Explorer, Expedition, Mustang, Edge, Escape, Bronco. If your Ford has a push-button electronic throttle and a modern ECU, this applies to you. Section 2. What this reset actually is. People hear the words ECU reset and immediately picture something complicated. A laptop, diagnostic cables, software, a technician in a lab coat. The reality is almost embarrassingly simple, which is exactly why the service industry would rather you didn't know about it. Your Ford's engine control unit is essentially a learning computer. From the moment your engine first fires up, that computer begins collecting data. It watches how you press the accelerator. It monitors your idle patterns. It tracks your fuel trims, your throttle position, say your oxygen sensor feedback, your idle air control behavior. And over time, it builds what's called adaptive memory, a stored profile of how your specific engine has been running. In theory, this adaptive memory is a good thing. The ECU is supposed to compensate for normal wear, make small adjustments to keep things running efficiently, and account for environmental conditions like altitude and temperature. That's the sales pitch Ford gives engineers when they design the system. Here's what actually happens in the real world. That adaptive memory accumulates errors. It gets corrupted by a bad sensor reading that only happened once. It locks in a fuel trim that was appropriate during a cold winter week and never fully corrects itself when summer arrives. It learns your cautious commuter driving habits and decides the engine should behave like it's permanently stuck in traffic. The computer doesn't forget bad data unless you force it to. A reset wipes that slate completely clean. Every adaptive value, every learned fuel trim, every stored idle parameter goes back to factory default. The ECU starts over. And when a healthy engine starts over from factory defaults, the results are immediate and dramatic. Section 3. The history behind the ECU and why it goes wrong. Ford started using electronic throttle control seriously in the early 2000s. Phasing out traditional cable-operated throttle systems across their lineup. By 2004-2005, almost everything coming out of Dearborn was running drive-by-wire. That means there is no physical cable connecting your gas pedal to your throttle body. When you press the pedal, you are sending an electronic signal to the computer, which then decides how much to open the throttle plate based on dozens of variables. This system is more precise than cable throttle in almost every way. But it introduced a new problem that didn't exist before. The more a computer learns, the more opportunities it has to learn the wrong things. Think about how most people drive their trucks. 40% throttle maximum for 90% of their trips, short commutes, gentle acceleration, stop-and-go traffic where the engine never really breathes. Over weeks and months of this, the ECU quietly teaches itself to be timid. It pulls back throttle response, anticipating your soft driving style. It adjusts fuel trims based on incomplete combustion data from all those short cold trips. It shifts the automatic transmission earlier because it thinks that's what you want. And then one day you get on the highway and the truck feels flat, hesitates, doesn't respond like it used to. You assume something is broken. 9 times out of 10, nothing is broken. The computer just got too comfortable with your bad driving habits and decided that's the new normal. The reset forces it to forget everything and start fresh, which is often all the truck needed. Section 4. Step by step. The exact reset procedure. Here is the exact procedure. Read it once completely before you start. The sequence matters more than most people realize. And doing steps out of order is why so many owners try this and report no change. Step 1. Park your Ford on level ground. Engine off. Turn your key to the on position without cranking the engine. If you have a push-button start, press the start button once without pressing the brake pedal. You want the electrical system fully active but the engine not running. All your dash lights should be on. You should hear the fuel pump prime. Step 2. Press the accelerator pedal all the way to the floor. Hold it there. Do not pump it. Do not modulate it. Full pressure, floor to carpet, and hold it. Step 3. Count in full seconds with your foot pinned to the floor. This is the step people rush. Count slowly. 1 1000, 2 1000, all the way to 10. The ECU needs the full 10 seconds to recognize the pedal input and begin the reset sequence. Step 4. Turn the key back to the off position, or press the start button to shut everything down. Release the pedal completely. Step 5. Wait 10 seconds. Do not skip this pause. The system needs a complete power down cycle before you restart. Use your phone timer if you need to. 10 full seconds with everything off. Step 6. Start the engine normally and let it idle without touching anything. Don't turn on the air conditioning. Don't switch on the radio. Don't touch the gas pedal. Let the ECU come up on its own and establish a baseline idle. The first idle may be slightly rough or hunt a little between RPMs. This is completely normal. The computer just lost all of its learned data and is essentially seeing your engine for the first time. Give it 2 to 3 minutes of the undisturbed idle time before you judge anything. That's it. 30 seconds of active input and 2 minutes of patience. No tools, no parts, no bill. Section 5. What happens inside the computer? When you do this, understanding what's actually happening underneath makes you a more confident Ford owner. So, let me explain the mechanics of this. When you hold the pedal to the floor with the key in the on position and the engine off, you're triggering a specific diagnostic protocol Ford engineers built into the ECU. The computer recognizes this input pattern as a command to flush volatile adaptive memory, not the base calibration that came from the factory, not your VIN-specific programming, just the learned adaptations that have been layered on top over months and years of driving. Think of it in 2 layers. Layer 1 is the factory tune. That's baked in permanently and stays untouched. Layer 2 is the adaptive overlay. That's everything the ECU has learned since the day you drove off the lot. And that's exactly what the reset clears. Once that adaptive data is cleared, the fuel trim tables go back to 0. The idle air control resets to factory values. The throttle position learning data erases. The transmission shift adaptation. If your Ford shares ECU communication between the engine and transmission control modules, also benefits from this process. When you restart and the engine idles undisturbed, the ECU begins rebuilding its adaptive profile from scratch, but this time starting from a clean baseline. If your engine is mechanically healthy, the new baseline will be dramatically better than the corrupted one that just got wiped. Throttle response sharpens because the computer is no longer applying timid throttle corrections it learned from a year of grocery store driving. Idle quality smooths out because the fuel trims are starting fresh instead of stacking corrections on top of old errors. One customer drove a 2017 F155.0 Coyote that idled rough every single morning for 6 months. 3 different shops, 3 different diagnoses. None of them fixed it. We did the reset. Rough idle was gone the next morning. The computer had been overfueling at startup based on bad learned data. It had built up over 40,000 miles of short trips. Clean slate fixed in 30 seconds what hundreds of dollars in diagnostics couldn't. Section 6, the relearn drive, the step. Everybody skips. Here's where 90% of the people who try this procedure go wrong. They do the reset, start the truck, drive it to the coffee shop 2 miles away, declare it didn't work, and write off the whole thing as a myth. The relearn drive is not optional. It is half the procedure. When the ECU starts fresh, it needs input. Real, varied, meaningful input. Without it, the computer will just relearn the same lazy habits it had before. And within a week, you're back where you started. The whole point of the reset is to give the computer a better foundation to build on. If you hand it the same bad data, it builds the same bad house. Here's what the relearn drive needs to include. You need city driving with complete stops and full acceleration away from lights. You need highway driving at sustained speed, ideally above 65 miles per hour for at least 15 continuous minutes. You need moderate hard acceleration, getting up to around 3,500 to 4,000 RPM at least a few times. And you need some idle time, sitting at a red light or in a parking lot, letting the ECU see what stabilized idle looks like on a warm engine. The whole relearn drive should be a minimum of 20 to 30 minutes with all of those elements included. If you can do 45 minutes, even better. And this is critical. During the first 15 minutes of the relearn drive, turn off your air conditioning, turn off your heated seats, turn off anything that adds load to the electrical system. You want the ECU focused entirely on throttle, fuel, and idle learning without external variables complicating the baseline. If you're watching this and thinking, that sounds like a lot for a free fix, consider that the alternative is paying a shop $150 to do exactly this process. Call it a throttle body recalibration, and hand you a receipt with a 30-minute labor charge. Section 7. Mid-script engagement break. If this is already saving you money, smash that subscribe button right now and hit the bell. We put out Ford-specific content every week that dealerships genuinely don't want their customers watching. Let's keep going, because the list of problems this reset fixes is longer than most people expect. Section 8. Every problem. This reset can fix. Here is where this gets genuinely impressive. So many drivability problems in modern Fords trace back to corrupted adaptive data, rather than failed hardware. Let me walk through the most common ones. Sluggish throttle response. This is the most frequent complaint on F-150s and Explorers over 60,000 miles. The truck feels lazy off the line, like pressing the gas pedal through wet concrete before anything happens. In the majority of cases, this is the Ian's Chalice applying soft throttle corrections learned from months of cautious driving. Reset clears it immediately. Poor fuel economy. When fuel trims drift out of range, the ECU compensates by running richer than necessary. Owners watch mileage drop from 18 to 14 miles per gallon over the course of a year, with no obvious cause and no warning lights. A reset returns fuel trims to baseline and typically recovers 1 to 3 miles per gallon within a few days of relearn driving. Rough cold, start idle. Especially common on EcoBoost engines. The truck starts rough, hunts for RPM, and takes a full minute to settle on cool mornings. The ECU learned incorrect cold start enrichment values and keeps overfueling on every startup. Reset erases those bad values instantly, hunting or surging idle at stops. Tachometer bouncing between 600 and 900 RPM while you sit at a red light. Classic corrupted idle air control learning. The ECU lost its reference point. Reset gives it a clean one. Transmission shift complaints. Hard shifts, early shifts. That jarring kick you feel pulling away from a light. Modern Fords share adaptive data between the ECU and transmission control module. I have seen trucks scheduled for transmission service get completely resolved with nothing more than this reset. Phantom check engine lights. Lean codes that appear and disappear with no consistent pattern. Reset first. Always reset first before replacing a single part. Section 9, Model and Engine, Specific Results. Different Ford engines respond to this reset in slightly different ways, and it's worth knowing what to expect for your specific truck. On the 3.5 EcoBoost, this is arguably the most impactful reset you can perform. EcoBoost engines are incredibly sensitive to adaptive fuel trim drift because of the turbocharging and direct injection combination. Owners with these engines consistently report the biggest improvements after a reset. Throttle response sharpens noticeably, idle quality improves, and boost delivery feels more linear. On the 5.0 Coyote FAS 8, the improvements tend to be more about refinement than transformation. Coyotes are well tuned from the factory, but they still accumulate idle and throttle adaptations over time. Post-reset Coyotes typically show smoother idle and improved mid-range throttle feel. Owners running performance tunes on top of factory calibration should consult their tuner before performing a full ECU reset, as it can interact with tune parameters. On the older 5.4 Triton, which is still out there in hundreds of thousands of trucks on the road right now, this reset is enormously valuable. The 5.4 accumulated notorious idle problems and throttle adaptation drift over high mileage, and the reset procedure addresses both. If you're running an older F-150 or Expedition with the 5.4, do this monthly and your truck will thank you. On turbocharged 4-cylinder applications, the 2.3 EcoBoost in the Ranger and Bronco responds extremely well, particularly for throttle response and fuel economy recovery. These smaller displacement turbocharged engines work hard, and their adaptive tables drift faster than larger naturally aspirated engines. For Explorer and Expedition owners, the same procedure applies identically. These platforms share the same ECU architecture as the F-150, so the results mirror what truck owners experience. Section 10. What this reset won't fix. Affichiar and why that matters. I'm going to be straight with you here, because this is where some YouTube channels lose credibility and start telling people things that aren't true. This reset is not magic. There are real mechanical and electrical problems that no software procedure will touch, and you need to know the difference before you replace a legitimate repair with a false sense of security. If your truck has a misfiring cylinder because an ignition coil is failing, the reset will not fix it. It may temporarily smooth the symptoms because the ECU relearns around the misfire for a short period, but the coil is still bad and the misfire will return. Same with failing fuel injectors. A reset can temporarily mask the symptom by adjusting fuel trims around a weak injector, but that injector will keep degrading and the problem will come back harder. A failing MAF sensor will read wrong before and after a reset. If your sensor is physically contaminated or electronically degraded, clean it first, or replace it if cleaning doesn't resolve the readings. Then do the reset. Cam phaser wear on 3.5 EcoBoost engines produces a very specific cold start rattle that no reset will address. That's a mechanical problem that needs oil pressure and physical hardware attention. Resetting the ECU on a cam phaser issue will not stop the rattle. Major vacuum leaks, failed oxygen sensors, cracked spark plugs, and low compression are all hardware problems that live outside the scope of ECU adaptation. The reset is for corrupted learned data, not broken parts. Use it correctly, and it's one of the most powerful free tools available to a Ford owner. Misuse it as a substitute for real diagnosis, and you risk letting genuine mechanical problems go unaddressed until they become catastrophically expensive. Section 11. Pro variations. The extended reset and the battery method. Now that you know the standard reset, let me give you two pro-level variations. Mechanics use when the basic procedure is not enough. The first is the extended reset. This is what you pull out for stubborn problems that keep coming back. Transmission hunting that will not resolve. Rough idle codes that return within days. Throttle response that improves after a standard reset, but degrades again inside a week. The procedure is identical, except you hold the pedal to the floor for 30 full seconds instead of 10, and you wait 30 seconds after key off before restarting. The longer hold time allows the ECU to complete a deeper flush of adaptive tables that the short version sometimes misses entirely. Your relearn drive after an extended reset needs to be a minimum of 45 minutes, with at least 20 continuous minutes of highway driving above 65 miles per hour. The second variation is the battery disconnect reset. This is the nuclear option. It clears not just ECU adaptive memory, but every stored value across every module in the vehicle. Transmission control module, body control module, everything at once. Disconnect the negative battery terminal with a 10mm wrench, but here is the part most people miss. Press the brake pedal 10 to 15 times. Hit the horn. Cycle the headlights. Open and close both front doors. You are draining the capacitors in every module to ensure a complete system power down that simply pulling the cable alone will never fully achieve. Leave it disconnected for 30 minutes minimum. When you reconnect and restart, your radio presets will be gone, and your power windows will need recalibration. Your transmission may shift rough for the first 50 to 100 miles. That is completely normal and temporary. A 2015 F-150 EcoBoost came in with a dealer diagnosis of a failing sync module, $4,000 quote. We did a full battery disconnect reset, problem gone. 90 minutes of work on a Saturday morning. You just learned something that a significant portion of the Ford service industry actively benefits from you not knowing. One free procedure, 30 seconds of input, and 20 minutes of intentional driving. It addresses throttle response, fuel economy, rough idle, shift quality, cold start behavior, and phantom check engine lights across virtually every modern Ford platform built in the last 20 years. Do this every 25 to 30,000 miles as preventative maintenance, anytime you replace a sensor or major engine component, and anytime your truck starts feeling different than it used to without an obvious mechanical explanation. How many of these symptoms have you been living with that this reset might fix? Drop a comment below and tell me what problem you're going to try this on first. And if this just saved you a service appointment, smash that subscribe button and share this with every Ford owner you know. Their trucks are sitting in driveways right now carrying the same corrupted data, and nobody has told them yet. I'll see you in the next video.